I drove up the mountain on the day the first big snow came. The sky was low and grey. The road was white and hard, like bone under skin. I was on my way to my Aunt Ruth's cabin to clear it out and lock it for the season. She had passed in the fall. The cabin sat alone by a lake, a little dark shape in a wide white world. I told myself I was not afraid. I stopped at the last store before the road turned to a long drift. The old man at the counter watched the storm and chewed a toothpick. He said I was bold to go up there in this weather. I told him I had chains and a full tank and a good heater. He nodded, then said a strange thing. "If you see footprints, that stop at your door. And don't go back," he said. "Do not open up. Not for anyone." He said it like he meant it. I laughed a little because I did not want to look scared. "You've been telling scary stories in here again," I said. He didn't laugh. He looked at me like a man who had seen something himself. "You'll be the one at the door," he said. "That's the trick. It will sound like you. It will be someone you love. Do not open the door." I took my bags and nodded and told him thanks. I wish I had asked him more. The cabin was a dark square under heavy trees. Smoke stains ran up the stones of the chimney from old winters. The lake behind it was a flat grey mirror with frost creeping in from the edges. My boots crunched on fresh snow. The sound was sharp and lonely. I unlocked the door and let stale air out. The inside smelled like old wood, old wool, and the faint, clean bite of cold iron. I made a fire in the black stove and turned on the small generator. The cabin warmed just enough to sting my fingers. I walked through the rooms and found what I knew I would find. My aunt's books, her old coat on a peg by the door, a tin of buttons, a cracked oval mirror, a box of letters tied with string, a photo of her and my mother as girls. They stood by the lake in winter. I looked behind them in the photo and saw it, a set of footprints in the snow, half out of frame, stopping at the edge. I told myself they were theirs. Night came early. The wind pushed on the walls like a slow, heavy sea. The fire sighed and popped. I ate a can of soup and some bread that tasted like the inside of the door. I tried the radio and got static and a voice I did not know giving the weather. It would get worse through the night. I put another log on and sat in the old wicker chair that creaked like a voice. Sometime after midnight, there were 3 slow knocks on the door. They were polite. 1, 2, 3. I stood up and walked to the door. "Who is it?" I asked. The wind slid around the cabin. No answer. I pulled the curtain aside and looked through the small pane of glass. The porch was white. The world beyond was a swirl of white and dark trees. But there, in the fresh snow, was a set of footprints. One set. They came up the path and stopped right at the threshold. There were no prints leading away. "Hello?" I called. I thought of the old man's words. It could be a hiker, I told myself. Someone in danger. I called again. "Do you need help?" Nothing. I unlatched the door and opened it a crack. Cold air rushed in. It tasted like metal. No one stood there. The prints were deep and clean. The toes were pressed into the snow like a hand. The heels were light. They were not mine. They did not look quite right. The wind moved around me like a person passing. I shut the door. I did not sleep well. When the wind howls and the stove glows, things in your head whisper. I kept seeing those prints and thinking of shapes I did not want to name. The window glass grew a skin of frost. My breath made a small cloud in the dark. Once, near dawn, I thought I heard someone say, "Help," from far away, thin as a string. I sat up and listened. and the house was old wood and size. In weak daylight, I went out to look. The prints were clear in the new light. They were not like mine. The ridge at the side of the print was wrong. There was a smoothness there. I followed them with my eyes as they went back down the path to the edge of the trees, and then, quite simply, they stopped. No turn, no space where the step would land next. They ended like a sentence with no period. I walked out a little to see if I had missed something. My boots made their own prints. I felt watched. At the edge of the trees, half buried in drift, I saw a small blue mitten. It was stiff with ice. Beside it, there was an old wooden marker, just a stick with a cross cut in it. The wind touched my ear like breath. Back inside, I tried the radio again. There was the weather, then static, then a voice I knew. It said my name once. Ethan. The speaker buzzed. I leaned close. Say again, I said. It hissed. Then I heard 3, 2, and it cut to static. I turned the knob with cold fingers. Who is this? No answer. The stove cracked like a bone. That night I made a plan. I poured a thin line of salt across the inside of the door. I spread flour on the floor by the threshold and down the hall. I tied some thread around the back door handle and across to a nail on the opposite frame. I set my old phone to record with the little bit of charge it had left. I did not think it would matter, but I needed to feel like I was doing something. I told myself this was silly. I told myself I would feel foolish in the morning. The knock came later, 3 beats, like a slow heart. I stood with my back to the door and said nothing, like the old man told me. The stove dimmed. The wind said something I did not want to hear. The knocks came again. I held my breath. They stopped. Something moved by the back wall. I slept, but it was not real sleep. It was more like falling from a low height and landing and falling again. At first light, I saw that the line of flour was marked. There were prints on the boards. Not boots, bare feet, small. The flour had made a paste that had a faint shape of little toes. The prints went from the threshold right across the salt without touching it, and down the hall to my bed. They stopped by the place where my head had been. There were none going the other way. The thread on the back door was still tied. I felt the inside of my mouth go dry. I looked at the phone. It had turned off with no new video. I needed a reason. I needed an answer that did not have a shape. I went to the attic to find old clothes to burn and found a trunk. Inside was a small journal with a blue cover. It was my aunt's hand, but the entries were old. The first pages were simple lists. The last pages were not. They told about a winter when there was a storm, like a wall. There were knocks at the door and someone who said a name. Do not open after the last print, she had written. Do not speak back if it says your name. Do not sweep away the final print inside, or it will make a new one. There was more I did not want to read. I walked to the lake because I could not stay in the house. The ice was a wide gray sheet with a black circle near the middle where water showed. There were footprints in the snow by the shore, old and half-filled, leading to that dark place. There were no prints coming back. I did not go near the open water. I stood at the edge and listened. The lake made a sound like a low drum. Thin bubbles moved under the ice and stopped under my feet. I stepped back. As I turned, I thought I heard a soft tap from under the ice. I ran back to the cabin and did not look at the door. The storm grew its teeth that evening. The wind turned from a hiss to a long moan. Snow flew past the window like sand. The cabin groaned. There were knocks again, but this time the voice came with them. It was a voice I knew too well. "Please," it said. "It's so cold. Please let me in." It was my mother's voice. She had died years ago, and she never begged for anything in life. I put my hands over my ears and closed my eyes. Then it was my aunt. "Ethan," she said, in the tone she used when I fell as a child. Then a child's voice I had not heard in a long time. "It's okay," it said. "I'm not mad." I wanted to answer. I did not. I stood in the middle of the room and watched my breath. It made a cloud. Then I saw another cloud behind me, another breath. I held my breath and watched. The second cloud kept going. Warm puffs in a cold room. I turned quick and the air was empty. I took the old oval mirror off the wall and held it up. The glass trembled in my hands. I saw myself, pale and wide-eyed. And for a second, I saw a taller shadow behind me, its head bent near my shoulder. I turned. There was nothing. When I looked again, my reflection was alone and strange. Boots thumped on the porch. I slid a note under the door. "Who are you?" I wrote. The paper came back a minute later. It was blank. The ink had frozen into a smear. 3 knocks, then small taps on the windows, one after the other, like fingers running around the cabin. I counted my heart to keep from counting the taps. The steps outside moved in a slow circle, crunch on snow like a code. They stopped under the bedroom window. The curtain moved a little, as if someone leaned there, hands on the sill. Snow should fill in footprints when wind blows, but the new set outside did not fill. The flakes seemed to slide around them. I took a picture through the glass. The photo showed white upon white, and there was a human shape that wasn't a shape. It was a hole in the snow in the shape of a person, from head to feet, as if the snow would not touch them. The skin on my arms crawled, as if small things walked there. The chimney coughed. Smoke fell back into the room and made my eyes burn. The fire hissed, as if it were wet. The room dropped in temperature until my breath hurt in my throat. Ice grew on the nails that stuck out of the beams, not on the outside walls but inside. Thin white rings. Something scratched inside the flue. I pushed the poker up, and something soft came down with the ash, a tangle that looked like hair, until I saw it was some fine root, pale and dead. I could not take it. I packed a bag and opened the door. The world was a sheet in the wind. A white skin pulled over everything. I got the truck started, and I made it down the lane while the tires slid and bit. The road to town cut through high drifts like a dark trench. Half a mile from the cabin, a snowplow came by slow with its light on, its blade low. As it passed, I saw through the windshield. No one was in the cab. It turned the corner and was gone. I looked behind. In my wake, the snow was smooth again, and then my own boot prints appeared in it without me walking there. They came after me, step after step, neat and greedy. I turned back for the cabin, because there was nowhere else to go. That made sense. I barred the door and hammered boards over the windows with the last nails in the kitchen drawer. The hammer was heavy and cold, and felt like a tool, and like a weapon. The old journal lay on the table. I read a page I had not dared to read. "It takes our last step," my aunt had written. "It finishes the walk we do not take. It walks your walk better than you. Do not give it your shape. Do not let it catch you in your own track." My skin prickled. I thought of my steps in the yard. I thought of the single line up to my door and nowhere else. I did not want to think about the past, but that house wanted me to. A voice in the vent asked, "Why did you leave me?" I shut my eyes. I was back on the lake as a boy with my cousin Simon. He wanted to go farther out that year. I said no. I turned to get help after the first crack. I told myself I would be back in a minute. I ran. When I came back with adults, the hole was wider, and his hat floated there like a dead bird. My aunt never blamed me, but I blamed myself. The thing knew that. It let the guilt hang in the air like light smoke. I wrote to steady my hands. I wrote the time each time I heard 3 knocks. I made a line every time the stove sighed. The clock on the wall stopped at 3:03. The radio clicked and popped to life and died again. It hummed and whispered the numbers 1 to 3 and then cut out. I thought if I could get to morning, I'd be okay, even if it was a childish thought. Morning changes nothing but the light, but still, we wait for it. The door latch lifted on its own and sat back down. My heart tried to punch through my ribs. Then, something slid under the door into the room. It was a small blue mitten, wet and dark with melt. It was the same color as the one I had seen by the tree. I pushed it back with the broom. It slid in again, slow and sure, as if the floor tilted. I picked it up with 2 fingers and set it on the stove. It did not steam. It was cold as ice and stayed that way. There was a sharp sound like a toy string breaking. The thread on the back door was loose, but the door was still closed. I ran to the kitchen. The flour on the floor had new marks. They were my boot treads, the square pattern with the nick in the left heel. They moved past me and into the hall, and I had not walked there. I stood and heard my own voice speak from outside. "Ethan, open up," it said. It sounded like me on a day when I was tired and kind, the way I sound when I let someone go ahead of me in line. My own voice was at my door. I spread ash in the hall like a trap. I shut my eyes and held the axe and wished for anything else. A step came behind me anyway, without sound. No ash blackened it. I slid to the side and swung the axe into the air and hit empty cold. "Say my name," I said, because I had to do something. "Ethan," it said. But something was wrong with the way it hit the air. The H was a small grin of breath, not a sound. The voice had no real throat. I went to the bedroom and saw that the last wet print on the floor by my bed was still there. I had mopped up the others with a towel, but this one remained. It was a dark oval, a little melted, a little refrozen. I leaned close. I thought I saw a little face in it for a breath. Not a whole face, just eyes. It was my face, bare and small. I shouted and fell back and kicked the chair and wanted to break everything, but it would not change the shape of that print. The fire would save me, I told myself, if I kept it hot. It would keep the thing in the corners. I pulled the kerosene from the closet and dripped some on a heap of kindling to start a big flame. I struck a match. It flared and then went out in a breath. I struck another. It died. The room ate the fire like an animal. I held the match in my hand and watched it burn down to my skin, and the flame died right before it could hurt. Cold made its own rules. I climbed to the attic again because the idea of a higher place felt safer. I dug through boxes and found a music box, the little tin kind with a ballerina that had lost an arm. It began to play when I touched it. I did not wind it. The tune was slow and sweet, and it made the hair on my arm stand up because it was the song my aunt used to hum when she cooked. I stopped it. It started again, and then stopped on a wrong note. The attic hatch slammed shut with a flat sound. I pushed at the hatch. It did not move. Frost sealed it like glue. I banged with the heel of my hand until the skin split. I worked the edge of the axe under the frame. The axe fell from my hand as if the air had a slope and dropped through the opening. I looked through the crack. The hall was not a hall. It was a field of white. Snow lay inside the house. It was deep enough to soften the fall sound of the axe. A long, white drift ran from the front door into the middle of the room. My stomach went cold as the ice outside. I waited and listened. Something moved in that inside snow. Step, drag, step, drag. It came and stood under the hatch. "I'm stuck," it whispered in a small voice. "I'm stuck and it's cold." I wanted to cry. "I'm sorry," I whispered, because I had been sorry for years. I pressed my forehead to the wood and felt the cold come through to my bone. I thought of the prince, like a story written in white. Each winter, the same story ran. People walked the lines others had left. And then, the print that was last was the only one that mattered. If I stepped into the last one, I would finish a sentence I did not want to read. If I swept it, it would write a new one. If I went outside, it would meet me at my own door. The way out was crooked. I hit the hatch hard with my shoulder. It cracked open, and a drift fell in on me, and I fell with it. Snow was inside my house up to my waist. The windows were white, as if I were buried. The stove was a dark mouth in a hill of white. I laughed once because it was too strange, and the laugh sounded like a cough. I moved on chairs and boxes, like a child playing a game, because the floor was a trap of prints, and I did not want to step where I had already stepped. The inside of the door was thick with frost. Someone had written there with a finger, "Open me." I scraped the frost with my own finger and wrote no. The letters ran like tears and froze again into blank ice. At the end of the hall was a small window that faced the lake. It had grown a skin of ice on the inside. In that ice, a shadow moved. It looked like a boy underwater, thin and gray. He lifted his hand and pressed his palm to the glass. I lifted mine and put it near without touching. The ice cracked in a spiderweb around where our hands almost met. The boy smiled without teeth. His mouth formed a word. "Come." I stepped back, and the crack grew a little, and then healed itself in slow creep. I grabbed my coat and my pack. I took my aunt's journal and the photo of her and my mother. I put them in my coat like a heart. I found paper and wrote a short note and put it on the table. It said, if anyone found this house, they should go back to town and get help. It said, do not follow footprints. Do not open the door at night for any reason. I thought of the old man at the store. I thought of Ruth. I thought of Simon on the ice. The house took a long breath in. The door moved. The wallboards creaked. The air felt pulled to one point. Then the breath went out. The front door latch popped like a knuckle. The door swung open an inch. The storm stood there like a person in a long white coat. The set of prints that had stopped at the door stretched and moved and came into the house as if they were living. The last footprint near my bed seemed to slide by itself and stop under my next step. I almost put my foot down into it. I caught myself. I fell and hit my knee, and my hand went into the last print by the bed. Cold pain shot up my arm like things with legs. I shook my hand hard and breathed through my teeth until it was gone. Voices came in a line like pictures on a strip. My father, gravel and gentle. Son, it's time to go. Then Simon, it's okay, the ice is thick. Then my own voice again, the one it had stolen, soft and close to the wood. You can trust me. I said nothing. I put my hands over my ears. I said not one word. The house hummed with wind, in a gust between one white sheet and the next. I could see the yard for a breath. There were 4 wooden markers sticking up like old teeth. One had no name. The others had names I knew. My aunt's maiden name was cut into one. Another had a child's first name and a year. The blank one made my chest tight. The snow covered them again, and the world was a wall. I made a plan that was part madness and part luck. I would go to the barn. It was 15 steps from the porch. I would count. I would not step in any print. I would not make a last one that was easy to take. I tied a rope around my waist and tied the other end to a beam. And I held an oil lamp, because fire did not love the house, but it loved the barn. I opened the door wide, and the wind kicked it like a friend who wants to fight. I jumped into the white. I counted 1, 2, 3. My feet sank. 5. I saw a line of old prints and scissored my legs to step over them. 7, 9. The storm pushed me like it wanted me to fall. 11. I hit the barn door with my shoulder. Inside, dark and dust, and a breath of hay. I pulled the door shut with both hands. I leaned on it and laughed again, because my body did not know what else to do. I lifted the lamp. The barn floor was a map of frost. It held prints in white lines, like thin scars. Boots, bare feet, a small dog once, a horse long gone, circles and half circles, all the steps that had ever come in, but none out. They stopped near doors and under the loft, and at the place where the smell of hay was sweetest. The rope on my waist felt good, not like a noose, like a hold. I tied it tight around a post. The lamp flame held strong here. I climbed to the loft and sat in the dry hay and put my back to the wall and closed my eyes. I slept a thin sleep and dreamed that my aunt stood at the bottom of the ladder and looked up. "Remember the story," she said. "The way out is a turn, not a step." I woke up with my mouth dry. I knew what to do. I would not make new prints for it to take. I would walk backward in my own tracks and give it nothing. It wanted a last step it could finish. I would give it the first one again. I held the lamp and made the rope tight as a nerve. I opened the door and faced the barn, not the house. I put my foot back into my fresh print and then the other into its pair. I moved backward like a slow dance. 11, 10, 9. The world blew at me like a love that hated me. My heel slid into a soft place. That was not my step. It was the last step trying to take me. I shifted my weight and found the right hole again. 3, 2, 1. The porch rose into my back. I leaned in and stepped back into the cabin. I shut the door with my whole body and put the bar down and sat on the floor and cried until I could breathe again. I fed the stove with everything I could. The old chair, the broken stool, the 2 dead books that were waterlogged and no use. I kept the pages I needed. The fire burned bright and angry. The radio tried again to speak. "This is a warning for all mountain residents," it said. Clear as a bell, then went to dust. It came back once and said, "If you hear your name, do not." And someone turned the dial on the other end to noise. I smiled without humor. I did not need the radio to tell me what not to do. I knew now. I watched the print by my bed. It steamed, and then it did not. The edges froze hard and changed shape. It was not a foot now. It was a handprint, small. I did not touch it. I sat by the stove and warmed my sore hand. I told the house out loud that I would leave that last mark where it was. I said sorry again, to the air, to Simon, to Ruth, to myself. Light came slow and pale. The storm softened like an old song. The window turned from white to a flat gray that had depth. I opened the door and looked out. The yard was new and smooth. No marks, no path. It was beautiful in that clean way that makes you want to step into it. Just ahead of the door, one print sat alone in that untouched whiteness. A single boot. Not mine. It pointed toward the trees. That is how it begins. That is how it starts again. I closed the door and set the bar and sat back down. I wrote everything down. Every sound and word and print and breath, because words are fire when wood runs out. I wrote fast. Ink scratched like a mouse in a wall. I wrote until my fingers were stiff, and I had to warm them and write more. I told myself I would wait now. I would wait for a human voice in the light of day. I would not trust the night for anything. There are rules, simple as breath. Do not open the door when the footprints stop at it. Do not answer a voice that knows your name in the dark. Do not sweep away the last print inside, even if it looks wrong to you. Do not step into any print that is not your fresh one. If you must go, walk backward in your own steps. Do not look at the lake after midnight. Keep the fire if you can. If you hear 3 knocks, breathe and wait for the morning. There was one more knock. 1, 2, 3. It was gentle as before. The wind spoke words I would not let myself hear. Snow fell from the eaves with a soft waft. The fire stared at me like a live thing. I did not move. I watched the flame bite the wood. I watched the frost crawl and shrink and crawl again on the inside of the glass. I listened to my breath and counted it to 100. If you come to my aunt's cabin and you see the field white and good, and you see one print standing there like a coin on a table, please do not go to it. Please do not try to step where it invites you. Knock 3 times in daylight and wait. If I do not answer, leave and tell the old man at the store that you tried. Let the last footprint be the last. Let the snow keep what it wants to keep. Subscribe to our channel for more spine-chilling stories.